I've been a vegetarian for about 30 years now, and when people talk to me about vegetarianism, which they do occasionally, I've got a set of stock answers and a supply of stories to answer any questions about that. And those answers and those stories are usually to do with my job that I was doing 30 years ago, which was I used to work for the Ministry of Agriculture. It's now called DEFRA. Initially in a place called Accrington in Lancashire, and then up in Newcastle upon Tyne. And my job was to test various byproducts of animals. So I would go out to farms and collect samples of milk or cheese or butter, or occasionally water supplies to test them for the presence of harmful bacteria, or on some occasions chicken shit and pig slurry. And what I usually tell people when I talk about vegetarianism, I usually refer to those experiences and the experiences of occasionally going to slaughterhouses or being exposed to kind of battery farming conditions, and just kind of cite those instances as moments of epiphany. And that's pretty much the end of it. I have to say though, it isn't really true. I mean, I certainly did work for DEFRA, I did work for the Ministry of Agriculture, and did have all the experiences I talk about. But I'd be lying really if I said that they were the entire cause of my vegetarianism. I mean, the real cause is much more complex than that, and in a sense, relates, for me at least, to some of the thinking I've been doing recently about religion and faith and the concept of God, those kind of ideas. The truth of the matter is that just under 30 years ago, when I was living in Lancashire, I was married at the time, and my marriage broke up for various reasons. And partly as a result of that, and probably partly for other reasons as well, I had a bit of a nervous breakdown, a bit of a walking nervous breakdown. I wasn't hospitalised or anything like that. But I did go a bit weird for a while, and part of that weirdness involved me basically just walking away from that life, really. I just walked away from all my possessions, I walked away from my friends, my job, everything really, and just moved to a different city and just started a different life from scratch, effectively. And it was very great. It was great, actually. It set up a chain of events which led me to where I am now, and I'm not complaining about that. So, but part of that re-establishing, part of that starting again thing, and it's a very weird feeling if anybody's ever done it. It is very strange. You do feel very anchorless for a while, and rootless and ungrounded. But it's not entirely an unpleasant experience. But part of that, where am I going with this? Oh yeah, well, part of that is to do with this vegetarianism thing, really. I made partly because I was just like sharing a flat with a bunch of other single people, and one of the people I was sharing a flat with who had a friend, a woman friend, who I found very attractive, and she was vegetarian. So joined the dots, really. When I first met her, she said she was vegetarian. I said, "Oh, I'm vegetarian as well," and I wasn't. I just said it really because I wanted to make a good impression, and the whole chain of events followed from that. Turned out that she wasn't really a vegetarian at all. Actually, she ate chicken and fish. She just didn't eat red meat, and then she started eating. She did start eating red meat after that, actually. So I stayed vegetarian and she dropped it. So it's this really silly little set of circumstances. The reason why I'm saying that, though, isn't specifically to do with that time up in Newcastle. It was to do with what happened then. I mean, obviously, what I could have done is just kind of follow this girl into her dietary pattern and forget the whole vegetarian thing. But I didn't do that. I just stayed with it. And I kept up these observances as I started to think of them, of eating certain things and eating in certain restaurants and making certain requests in restaurants, and the whole kind of fabric of behaviour that falls out of that decision. Which shops you go to, what kind of the stories and the anecdotes that I mentioned, what kind of answers you give to questions. Because obviously I'd never said, "Oh, I'm a vegetarian," because Sue was a vegetarian and I fancied her. So I had to construct all these stories, and I'd keep returning to these stories and repeating to them, and keep returning to these observances, these learned behaviours, keep returning to these restaurants, keep returning to these conversations over and over again. And I've been doing that now for 30 years. And it's completely part of the fabric of my being now. I mean, there's no sense, there's no sense in which it's inauthentic. And I'm a kind of fake vegetarian. I couldn't honestly say that about myself now. There's no sense in which I'm pretending. There's no sense in which that, wait till no one's looking and then have a bacon sandwich. None of that stuff happens. I'm as invested in it as anybody I know, really. And it's part of the structure of my personality. But as I say, it's pretty much been built out of whole cloth following that period of rootlessness in my early 20s. Now the reason why I think this has something to do with religion, and this is a bit of a stretch, so I'm not sure if this will make any sense at all, is to do with, what lies at the heart of vegetarianism. Because I've had a lot of discussions about vegetarianism. I'm the only person in my family who's a vegetarian, all this, yada yada. So I've had a lot of discussions about it, and I'm very good at arguing the case, and I'm very good at making the rational arguments, and I'm very good at acknowledging the slippages and the moments of hypocrisy. Yes, I wear leather shoes, yada yada yada. And yes, I'm very good at acknowledging the kind of emotional components that render a kind of rational approach to vegetarianism a little bit tricky. And I've made all those arguments, and I can do it very well, I think, now. But one thing I never say, because I don't believe it, is I never say that at the heart of vegetarianism is something like a respect for life. I never say that. And I never say, yes, part of this philosophy is an ethos based on the connectedness of all living creatures, and we're all part of the circle of life, and we should cherish life because it's sacred, all that kind of stuff. I never say that. Or anything like it. I've heard it, but I've never said it. And if anybody asked me whether I believe that, I would say no. However, having said that, I can absolutely feel at the centre of my own completely strategic vegetarianism, I can feel the kind of pulse of that kind of thinking. Come on, Pups, this way. I can feel there's something in there. There's like a little gravity well at the centre of it, or like a turning point, an axis around which these other things are structured, a logical centre, a single idea through which all these other observances and practices and stories make sense, a single uniting factor. And it would be something like that, something like a viewpoint that life is sacred, or something like that. Even though I don't hold to that belief, I can feel its presence, or I can feel its I can feel it kind of holographically projected into the centre of all those disparate activities. Which I suppose, I suppose all I'm thinking there is, is there a correlation there between the observances that flow out of a moral life and flow out of a questioning life, a life that asks questions about origins and about causes and about destinations and about life and mortality and about change and transformation. There's a whole, that whole series of questions and observances and practices and emotions and thoughts and conversations. Is there something holographically projected in the centre of that, which we think of as something like God? I suppose I'm looking at Voltaire. If God didn't exist, it would be necessary to invent him, I think Voltaire writes. Is there a sense in which the construction, in the same way that the construction of a vegetarian life, as I say, kind of necessitates this projection of a sacredness at its centre, is there something about the moral questioning life, the human life and the limitations of that human life, which has a tendency to project a God at the centre of it?